Hi, everyone. It's 10 o'clock. And okay, so let's do the smart attendance and to make sure we get that finished with that. And so let me go to just close that. With that right now. Go to here, Chrome, and go to www.cuk.ac.ar. Then we make this a little bit bigger so we can see it. And then we go to English, and then we go to Cyber Campus, and then we go log in, and we log in on English again. And we go, I got to log in. So BENDED. And then my password. Okay, so close all of these boxes that always open up, and I go to methodology and these attendance, and the week 9 is smart attendance number is 631. 631 is your smart attendance number. So let me go to back to the chatting here and go to 631, enter that here, 631. And there you go, have your smart attendance number. So, all right, so let's pick up where we left off at last class, and let me open up my lesson plan for today and go to the lesson plan and open up Word. And the so one of the things I want to remind you, you get these emails from me, and I know you get lots of emails, so you might not pay close attention to them, but I just want to make sure that you see that that also, if I go to my Google Chrome account here and we go to Drive, that you can see here the sign-up sheet for the methodology debate. So I posted this, I sent you an email just to, so you got that email from me. That means you should go here. And of course, as a Google shared file, anybody can write on this file. So you can write your name in here. So you can see that Daywalk and Gloria have already signed up. And so is Juyong. So the other students should also sign up for a debate according to what you prefer. Okay. And so we will proceed with that. Nobody signed up for debate for Friday. So we'll continue with the, unless somebody signs up today or tomorrow, right? In which case, if somebody doesn't have an opponent, I will be their opponent if nobody else signs up to be an opponent of a student. So you can still sign up for tomorrow or today or tomorrow if you'd like to. So let's then go back to the notes. And okay. So all right. This is the first time I'm talking about the debate because I talked about it in the other 2 classes I have on Monday. So, and it apparently makes a difference to talk about this debate. So one of our many objectives in this class is to improve your already wonderful English speaking communication skills, your English communication skills. But that includes more than just speaking. That also includes the ability to write. And I'm not just sorry, I'm trying to do 3 different things at once. It not only includes your ability to write, but also your ability to speak in English. And so we want to give you opportunities to speak in class in a public presentation format. And of course, the one word to use to explain how to prepare, how to do well in public speaking is to prepare, And you prepare by writing. And you've been writing in this class. You've been writing your 150-word paragraphs, or they should be 100-word, I saw in the syllabus, 100-word paragraphs. And so that's true when we move to the debate format. When the students are debating, we're going to have the students lead the debate. They will do almost all of the talking. The 2 students or 1 student that signs up. Like I said, if nobody else signs up for a debate, I will be your debate opponent. And the format that we will use for the debate is a little bit different than the one that we've been using in class during the class debates on Friday, which we're going to use the, let me open up that file, the romantically named Lincoln Douglas format. And so here you see a file that I downloaded from the internet that is used in Ontario, Canada. So this is an expectation for students in school in Ontario, Canada. And, you know, I don't know if any of you've been to Toronto. I was in Toronto before the pandemic. I think over half the people that live in Toronto were not born in Toronto. So it's not born in Canada. So it's a very diverse place. It's maybe the most diverse place in North America. And so there are lots of students in those classes in high school whose English is not their first language. This is named after, even though it's a Canadian school, a famous debate that certainly all Americans learn about, called the Lincoln-Douglas debate by Abraham Lincoln when he was running for president. Does anybody know who Abraham Lincoln was? Deoc, who's Abraham Lincoln? Yes, the former president, the 17th president of the United States, who was president during the Civil War and who used his powers as commander-in-chief in the U.S. Constitution during wartime to begin to abolish slavery in the United States. And he was assassinated right after the war. But before he was elected president in 1860, he ran and lost against Stephen Douglas for the office of senator for Illinois, one of two senators from Illinois. He lost in that election, but in the course of that campaign, they debated slavery. Lincoln and Douglas campaign, I think it was 1858, had a debate on slavery. And the United States was on the eve of war. So this is a very sensitive topic, and everyone knew that war was coming. But most people knew, I should say. And of course, Lincoln lost to Douglas in this election for senator, but then Lincoln would beat Douglas for the office of president in 1860. So Lincoln comes back and becomes the president 2 years later. But the Lincoln-Douglas format involves affirmative, which is the pro. It's a many-syllable Latin word for pro. Speaks first in the Lincoln-Douglas format for 6 minutes. Then con or negative, the con side speaks for up to 6 minutes. And then the affirmative or pro side answers or responds to the con, rebuts the con, rebuttal for 4 minutes. And then con rebuts what the pro side said and then concludes for up to 7 minutes long. And then pro has the final word, the rebuttal conclusion for 3 minutes. So it's about what, 6, 12, 16, 20, 23, 26 minutes, but we're pretty flexible on the time. And of course, students during the debate can ask a question. You can ask questions to the debaters in this format. So you can see pro speaks 3 times, con speaks twice. And and then I'm going to ask you to vote on who won the debate anonymously using the survey, the vote function on Cyber Campus, and also to grade the debate anonymously. Vote who won, so vote twice, who won the debate and to grade the debate. But then I assign the final grade for the debates at the end of the semester, because I understand that for many students, this is a bit of a challenge. Not having public speaking in English experience before, and this is the first time. So the grading is pretty lenient on this. And so when you grade each other or evaluate each other's performance, I used to hand out this kind of use this kind of a format when we didn't have all of this pandemic and Zoom requirements, but I would ask the students to evaluate each other's performance in terms of the opening statement of pro and con. And an excellent opening statement gives an effective, well-organized and constructive speech, versus a good one is the main ideas are clearly presented and supported with evidence constructively. Satisfactory is a speech is delivered, it's constructive, some ideas are presented with some support. Limited is, then there's a problem, that basically there's the speech, the opening statement is not as well done as it should be, in the position is weakly supported, and something that's not comprehensible, or where it's not clear at all what the person's saying, like they haven't prepared, that's the lowest score, right? So 5 is excellent, 1 is poor. And then rebuttal, in the same fashion, an effective rebuttal analyzes flaws in the opening opening statement of the other side, and then also also constructively integrating the rebuttal points in their own argument, because typically in court proceedings, you not only want to show that the other side's arguments are weak or have weaknesses in them, you want to present an alternative explanation that looks as plausible or more plausible, so that your explanation, even though you are con, appears to be the more valid one. Remember, the purpose of all communication is to persuade, And that means to persuade, like we've talked about in terms of scholarly communication and scholarly writing, you need to know your audience. And so all of the students in the class have done the reading for the week. They've all written paragraphs. They've all looked at the material. So you want to persuade them to vote for you, that you won the debate. So how do you persuade them? By using the information that's from the scholarly peer-reviewed textbook that we're using in the class. If you can show them how your ideas have support according to Trompenars and Hampton-Turner and Cresswell and Poth, you're more likely to persuade me and the other people in the class that your side is true, your side is valid. And that relates to this bottom point about use of week's reading material, right? So use the material in the course for the week because everybody has written a paragraph on it, has studied it, and is familiar with it, and is more likely to be impressed by you if you can show how your side of the debate is supported by Trompenars and Hampton-Turner and Cresswell and Poth. And of course, if they don't use any information from the reading, then that's bad. And but you also want to, in these arguments, you want to also show, you want to make an integrated argument yourself. Even if I'm rebutting somebody, if I'm con, if I just look like my job, all I'm doing is trying to show how pro is wrong, without offering something insightful, enlightened, interesting as a counterpoint, I'm less likely to persuade people to support me over pro. And that's the theme here, where they keep saying they want a constructive, integrated argument that's always seems to be an important point. So also important is presentation style. You want to make an argument. You want to make an argument in a way that engages your audience, which means you want to look at your audience. You want the audience to pay attention to you by raising and lowering the tone of your voice. You want to appeal to them. You want to also remember, everybody wants to be entertained. When people have to go to a presentation, they want to enjoy watching the presentation. So all of this kind of activity up here is a form of performance. So how do I get you to like my performance? I appear friendly. I smile. I dress nicely, right? And I prepare for the debate so well that I have the information in my brain so well integrated into my thoughts that I don't need to read notes in making my presentation. I mean, when I first started making presentations, the way I had to make presentations, when the professor asked me to make a presentation on the week's readings, I learned that what I needed to do was learn that information so well that it's there in my brain. So I don't even need to really think much about what I have to say because it will just come out automatically when I start speaking. So how do you do that? You write a paper, basically. I would take notes in my own words of the reading that I had to read, that the class had to read for that week from the book. And then I would take notes on those notes in my own words. So I'd actually take a piece of paper, right? Here would be the book. And I would divide the paper into 3 columns. And I would take notes on this page. Then I would take notes on my notes. And then on the third column, I would put like keywords so that I would just be able to look at the keyword and would trigger all the information that was already integrated into my brain. And then I could roll up the paper and hold it in my hand when it was time to speak, but I would never use the notes. But I always knew that I'm nervous. But I always knew I had the notes there. So whatever happened, I could always just open notes and look at the notes, and even if necessary, read the notes just to get it done. In other words, it was like a security blanket. But you know what? I never used the notes because they're in the information was already in my brain. So that's the key to successful public presentation skills. Prepare, prepare, prepare. That means study the information that you need to present and learn it. And that means for me, writing it in my own words. That's why I always ask you, no more than 10% of any homework or paper should be direct quotes, because you don't learn very much if you just copy some text from a source. If you have to put it in your own words and integrate it with your argument, that's when you learn the information, right? So that's the key. And, you know, like I mentioned to my other classes, if you develop good public speaking skills, you're going to have a big advantage in your career, because my limited experience watching my members of my family and others do well in their jobs. My sister, for example, she works for the state of Ohio Bureau of Workmen's Compensation. And she is often asked to make presentations of the new information or new directives or new regulations that the state of Ohio government has made regarding how to regulate COVID-19 pandemic regulations regarding social distancing. And she gets asked to do this because she's good at it. And she's good at it and she enjoys it. And because she's good at it and people like watching her make a presentation, she gets lots of attention. She gets lots of promotions because she's got good public speaking skills. So it's hard to overestimate the value of being able to be effective in public. That's why, like, you see me get up out of that chair. I don't have to get up out of that chair, but I want to get out of this chair because I know I'm more likely to catch your attention if I do stuff like this. Like I'm at a talk show, right? And that's part of public speaking, public presentation, right? So that's why I have all these wires in my hand so that I don't trip over them when I'm walking around. Okay, so that I'll post this this file on the website, of course. And so, you know, those are the standards that are presented in terms of how to make a public how to engage in public speaking. And so that's that's the justification for the debate. Okay, any questions? If no questions, then we will go onward with the other material for this week. And so we were covering Chapter 3 of the Creswell and Poth Designing a Qualitative Study. So let's spend a little time on Creswell and Poth before we do some exercises in class. And open that up here. And so Creswell's definition. By the way, before we go further on this, remember we talked, let me open up the other material from the previous class regarding critical race theory. You saw those references in the photos that I embedded here about, for example, critical race theory. There you see critical theory and critical race theory and queer theory. This book was published in 2018, which means it was finished in 2017. So the text information is 5 years old. And of course, I'm looking forward to see how Creswell and Poth update the next edition of their book, because this critical race theory has become a big issue, the maybe most important issue in American politics and elections underway now in the primary general and general election this year for the U.S. Congress and other positions in the U.S. local and state governments, to all 80,000 of them. Critical race theory. I just talked about this in the American government and politics class I had this morning. Critical race theory. What is this critical race theory? Critical race theory is the way it's described. And this wasn't an issue in 2018. I never saw media coverage in the New York Times of critical race theory now that I see like now. And it particularly it became an issue when Donald Trump was defeated and the next set of elections began in the US after Donald Trump was defeated. And critical race theory has been portrayed as a perspective on the development of the American state from its founding 400 years ago using slavery. That when the first the first English immigrants who settled in the English colonies in the early 17th century, like in 1619, they brought with them at the same time enslaved Africans. And this critical race theory perspective is typically supposedly taught in law schools and in graduate programs about how the development of the modern American state cannot be understood unless one understands the reaction to and the fundamentally important role of slavery and enslavement in understanding American political development as a political system from its very foundings in 1619. That with the use of enslaved Africans, that this issue of enslavement and slavery was obviously a critically powerful issue for the development of the United States, if only because if you as a European, we don't have really slavery in England in 1619, but we're going to have slaves in America. So how are we going to justify having slaves in America? How are we going to feel justified in buying these people from other Africans, bringing them to America? Millions would die in being transferred during the Atlantic slave trade from the beginning of the 17th century until the end of the slave trade in the 19th century. 13 to 14 million Africans were purchased or enslaved, put on slave ships, and about 10 million reached North and South America. In other words, 3 million died, and their bodies were thrown over the ship into the water, off the ship's deck into the water. There used to be the sharks in the ocean, in the Atlantic Ocean, knew about these slave ships, and they would follow these slave ships because they know these slave ships were going to throw dead bodies off the ship into the water. How horrible the conditions were. Just to give you a sense of the horrible conditions of enslaved people, and how did the American community, the American colonies, develop culturally, politically, and spiritually, relying so critically on enslaving human beings to make the colonies, the new English colonies, profitable and successful. And this relates to topics I talk about in other classes. I guess maybe I'll have to talk about it here too, about how human beings have a predisposition to engage in what is typically called motivated reasoning. If you type in motivated reasoning into ProQuest, you will see it's a phrase that appears in scholarly literature. People, human beings, maybe not you, maybe not me, but generally speaking, most people have a tendency or a predisposition to perceive or understand the world in a way that allows them to feel good about doing whatever it is they want to do anyway. So if I'm going to make a lot of money through slavery, I want to feel good about making money through slavery. So what am I likely to do in terms of motivated reasoning? What am I likely to do in terms of seeing the world in a self-serving way? I will make a justification, an argument for slavery, that it's good because these Africans, look how supposedly primitive they are. Oh my gosh, they're so backward. We are civilizing them through slavery. We are bringing them from Africa to America, and they're becoming civilized. They are, of course, also learning about Christian religion. They didn't know about Christian religion in Africa until these people were brought to America. So we're saving their souls from going to hell after they die, because that's where people who are not Christian go when they die. If they're not Christian, they go to the devil. And so we're doing them good things. And if they rebel, if they resist being enslaved, we have to create a system that will enforce this enslavement. Remember, at the time of the American Revolution in 1776, when America declared independence from Great Britain, about 40% of the population, 40% in the South, southern part of the United States, were enslaved people. So almost half the population in the places that grew cotton and tobacco, the two money-making crops, right? The two crops for commodity crops that supplied Britain, because Britain, but also America, was going through the early industrial revolution, and the early industrial revolution focused upon textiles, making cloth for clothes. And cotton can only grow at that time in the southern part of North America. And so, of course, but it's very difficult, very hard to grow cotton and make it usable, and people don't want to do it. They don't want to work on cotton plantations. They want their own farms. And there's all this land all the way out to California waiting for the Americans to take. So if I come to America and I'm a poor English peasant coming to America from England, I'm not going to work on a cotton plantation. I'm going to do something else, maybe go even further west and take more land from the Indian populations that that live there in their hunter-gatherer societies, and take their land and create my own farm, my own plantation. So getting people to work on these plantations, cotton plantations and tobacco plantations, tobacco, right, comes from North America. Cotton comes from North America. Tomatoes, potatoes, all of these crops that are just so much part of the world's diet were first found in North America and could only be grown in North America. And so this slavery was a way by which to enforce people to work in these profitable early commodity crops to supply the factories of the early industrial revolution. And so this was critically important for these colonies to be profitable, and they made a lot of money off of this. And of course the British, they abolished slavery before the Americans did, but at the same time they wanted their colonies in North America to be profitable. So they didn't really abolish slavery in the colonies, even though slavery was being abolished in England by the end of the 18th century. And but then when, of course, the United States patriots who were leading the independence struggle became irritated and angry with the central government in London, the crown government in London in Great Britain, the British tried to undermine the independence struggle by appealing to these enslaved African people and their descendants, because their children were also enslaved, right? The children of slaves were also slaves, that if the British won against the Americans in the independence war, the British would free the slaves. So this, again, encouraged or inspired Americans to come up with more justifications and more controls over their Black people, over their enslaved African-American people. So, for example, there's been lots of discussion in critical race theory about how modern policing and the police philosophy and police practices for the police force in police forces in America is directly tied or founded upon controlling the enslaved population 300 years ago. From slave patrols and methods and mechanisms for keeping these enslaved Africans under control so that we could exploit them. And that is been argued as one of the reasons why, for example, here in Korea, you have one police force, right? There, you see them. In America, there are thousands of police forces. Counties have a sheriff, which is a county sheriff, county police force. There are 3,000 counties in America. Each county has a sheriff, which is like a police department. Each city has and town has a police force. Each township and counties can have a police force. The states each have their own police force. There's the Texas Rangers. You watch that television show? So Walker, Texas Ranger. The Texas Ranger, the Texas police force. The Ohio Highway Patrol is the state of Ohio's police force. Each state has its own police force. The national government has multiple police forces. And the argument is made that this division and separation into many different police forces reflects the focus on parochial control, that you have a society founded upon slavery and these white people being very upset or very concerned or very intensely interested in making sure they maintain the immediate ability to suppress the slaves in like local militia, local police forces that can be mobilized quickly to suppress slave uprisings and to go capture runaway slaves. So this is the kind of topic of discussion in critical race theory. Look, I've talked about this in my American government class, maybe not so much here, but it relates because of this book here in referencing qualitative research in critical race theory being leftist and progressive, that 2 out of all adults, 2%, out of every 100 adults, 2% of the adult population. So 2 out of every 100 people who are 18 years or older are in prison. Can you imagine that? That's incredibly high. Why is that the case? And why is it that at least 1/4 of the prisoners are Black, even though only 12% of the population is Black? Is it because there's something about black genetic DNA that makes them criminal? Well, that's what Adolf Hitler would say. Yeah, sure. But if you don't believe that there's something in African DNA that makes them criminal, then how are they made to be criminal? What is the nature of American society going back to its founding through all of the multitude of social, cultural, and political systems at work that produce the segregation and marginalization and impoverishment, disproportionate impoverishment of Black people to make them more poor, less educated, more targeted by police to produce these outcomes? Systemic processes that go beyond anybody's intentional thought that I'm a racist and I want to oppress Black people. White people don't do that. Most white people today, unless they're insane, do not admit that they're racist, unlike 100 years ago. Yes? There's been efforts to try to address that in the last 50 or 60 years in affirmative action programs. So because of these uprisings by Black people during the 1950s and 60s, which were sometimes violent, burning down Watts region of Los Angeles, burning down Newark, New Jersey, burning down big parts of American cities, the response of the American government was to try to lessen Black fury and anger at the belief that they were being targeted and persecuted by the police, who assume that they're criminals, that Black boys are bad, and Black boys, you need to target them because, these Black boys, and they don't use the term Black boys, these Black boys, they're savages. To try to overcome that or respond to that, there has been the effort to affirmative action to require that police forces hire a certain percentage of Black people, that fire brigades, fire departments that put down these jobs that are state-controlled jobs, that are public government, local services, that they have to be more representative of American society. So this is the kind of things that critical race theory discusses, for example, in trying to understand American policing and American law and American incarceration and American prison system. And it wasn't very controversial until 2 years ago. So if I show you a news report to show you how politically active this has become involved, because there has been the right-wing conservative political reaction in America against these new left social movements, including the civil rights movement and affirmative action, which many white Americans say, this is reverse discrimination. This is racism to fight racism, and racism is bad. So we can't hire policemen because they're Black. because that's un-American. Americans, we don't care about your race. We don't care about your religion. We don't care about your gender. We just care about your capabilities. We just care about your ability to get things done. And that's, of course, a romantic, stereotypical notion that Trump and ours and Hampton Turner highlight, that Americans are individualistic. Americans believe that people should control themselves to achieve. And if you fail to achieve, it's your fault. We don't admit that we rely upon other people or benefit from a broader community of support to make it possible for us to be successful, and to whom we owe support. It may be true, but we don't see it. We don't want to see it. And that goes back, according to critical race theory, to fundamentally this self-justification for why I am allowed to own slaves and the government should not interfere with me in what I do with my quote unquote property. That's how slaves were called during the Civil War. What did Thomas Jefferson write in the Declaration of Independence? That you have the right and I have the right as citizens of America to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. He got that from John Locke. John Locke was a theorist of 100 years earlier from Britain, one of the founding fathers of classical liberal political theory, who said it is fundamental human rights to life, liberty, and the ownership of property. But Thomas Jefferson, who was a slave owner, of course, and had lots of babies outside of wedlock with Sally Hemings, his black mistress, who he never acknowledged as his children. He wrote the Declaration of Independence and said, well, if we're going to fight this war, we have to put it in more romantic terms. So life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So property equals happiness. Money equals happiness in America. And slavery was a fundamental foundation for happiness in people who are making money through cotton and tobacco and other forms of commodity capitalism, commodity agriculture for capitalism. And so I'm telling you this in short order, in short form, but if you're a typical American, people want to feel good about themselves. That goes back to Fritz Heider and Leon Festinger, that people want to have a positive self-image, and back to social identity theory, right? I want to feel good about me. So I want to feel good. I want to see the world in a way that allows me to feel good about me doing what it is I want to do, including owning slaves. And so this is something that this critical race theory discussion tends to make a lot of Americans, unhappy. I don't want to hear about how America is not like the romantic image that we portray, that everybody's wealthy or successful because of their own efforts and people are poor because of systemic oppression. If you're poor, it's your fault. I mean, the typical American response is, I don't want to hear about the legacy of slavery. Slavery ended 150 years ago. I don't want to hear it anymore. I don't want to hear we have to make a special effort to hire Black people as policemen. I don't want to make a special effort that we have to hire Black people as college professors. I don't want to hear it. Because you're making me feel bad about being American. And I don't want to feel bad about being American because I'm American. Just like you don't want to feel bad about being Korean, and you don't want to feel bad about being Cambodian. And this gets Republican voters in particular excited because they think that the teachers, under the influence of the big government and its college professor allies over the decades, have been training teachers to teach about the legacy of racism, and that is somehow a reason why white people should be more tolerant of affirmative action programs that I just described, or that also that gay people and women and other genders who are not men, straight heterosexual men, have been oppressed by straight white heterosexual men. If you're a woman, or if you're a gay pop person or a trans person. I mean, I think I saw one estimate that maybe at least 4% of Americans might be gay. I don't know if that's really true, but queer theory, it relates to that, right? That gender is fluid, feminist theories. So just to show you how this has become a really hot topic in the United States today. I showed you that that hoax at the last class about that research that was fake research that was done that shows the criticism of those kind of leftist theories about gender and identity and got those fake articles published. But on to show you something more recent here, I have it. I know I have it here. This. So the governor of Florida is a man named Ron DeSantis, and Ron DeSantis is a governor, Republican governor who was a Trump ally, and Trump highlighted him, and he is now the governor of the third or second biggest state in America, Florida. You know, where Walt Disney is located, and Mickey Mouse, and all of those characters from Walt Disney, the governor of Florida and his education department has rejected 21 textbooks developed as math textbooks for consideration for purchase. Yes. Oh, yes. So the school system in the U.S. Teaches millions of students, and so spends a lot of money on books for those students. And so Florida, Ron DeSantis is a Trump ally. He is the governor of Florida. He's probably going to run for president. If Donald Trump doesn't run for president, he will run for president. He will be a leading candidate for president. So New York, Florida has rejected dozens of math textbooks, like mathematics. You can say, what does that have to do with gender and race? And the Florida Department of Education rejected dozens of math textbooks last week. The big question was why. The department said some of these books contain prohibited topics from social emotional learning or critical race theory. Look how many times critical race theory is mentioned in this article. Critical race theory, critical race theory, critical race theory. That these textbooks are going to hurt white students by making white students feel bad about being white, that they should feel ashamed of their history as Americans because they are benefiting from the legacy of white supremacy and the construction of an American society on the basis, often explicit in the past, implicit more recently, that white culture and white people are superior, that American culture is a white culture. And if you're Black, you are fundamentally disadvantaged because, you know, you're Black. And you or me as a white person, bad, bad, bad. You should be ashamed, white person, about what you have gained from your family or your background and the advantages that you have, white person, because you're not Black. My people did horrible things to Black people. And this might sound silly and simplistic, but this, when we're talking about the education of our children, my children are going to go to a public school and learn about the horrible things that white people did to Black people. And therefore, implicitly, that white people today are guilty because they resist affirmative action programs. They think affirmative action is reverse discrimination, that's a political agenda. That's serving a political aim, and it's not appropriate for teaching children. Rather, they're being brainwashed into the Democratic Party leftist agenda. So the New York Times, which conservatives view as liberal, as part of the problem, studied 21 of these math textbooks, and using online sample materials provided by the publishers of these books to Florida school districts, the New York Times was able to review 21 of the rejected math books and see what may have led the state to reject them. Because Florida has released so few details about its textbook review process, it is unknown whether these examples led to the rejections. But they do illustrate the way in which these concepts appear and don't appear in curriculum materials. In most of the books, there was little that touched on race, never mind an academic framework like critical race theory. But there was this focus on emotions and how you feel about math. But many of the textbooks included social emotional learning content, a practice with roots in psychological research that tries to help students develop mindsets that can support academic success. I don't, maybe I won't go through the whole thing here, but But right-wing activists like Chris Rufo, senior fellow at the Manhattan Institute, have sought to tie social emotional learning to the broader debate over the teaching of race, gender, and sexuality in classrooms. You know, like gay and lesbian students are young people are 4 times more likely to commit suicide than non-gay students. So you could make an argument that if we're going to try to help American society become more tolerant and a happier place for everybody, maybe we should be talking about in school about people that are not typical, that they might, a boy that looks or acts like more like a girl, should we abuse them? Should we make fun of them? Or should we try to be tolerant of them? And of course, the claim of these right-wing activists is that these school districts that support that are grooming the children to make them open to becoming gay. That's the terms they use, grooming, that these teachers and leftists who were taught by leftist college professors in universities become teachers, and then they use this leftist agenda to promote the undermining of traditional American values that you learn in church, that marriage is between a man and a wife. There are men and there are women, but no, we're supposed to teach them that gender is fluid. People they can be non-binary. It's okay if you want to be non-binary. And of course, if the school students see a gay teacher, maybe the gay teacher's spouse, a married man to another man, comes and visits the school, the students might view that teacher as a role model. So this is the kind of phobia and fear that is really driving this primary election, with the critical focus on issues like critical race theory and gender deconstruction. Gender deconstructionism, I didn't highlight that in yellow here. The gender is constructed, and there's no objective, solid definition of gender. And so we'll see. I mean, people are expecting that the Republican Party is going to do very well in the November elections and probably take back control of the Congress. Joe Biden will remain president. But for this class, the critical issue is that critical race theory has been one of maybe the most important, not the only, but the most important issue that Republicans have been using in terms of the public school system and its critical race theory's role in teaching children, even if it doesn't really exist, as a motivating factor to mobilize their voters and their supporters to vote and win in November of this year. So just to show you the highlight of this topic on critical race theory. So let's go back then and talk a bit about these notes. So let me put down this microphone so I can work at the desk here. And so qualitative, says you can hear me here. Qualitative research begins, you can see that, right? Qualitative research begins with the assumptions and use of interpretive theoretical frameworks that inform the study of research problems, addressing the meaning individuals of groups ascribe to a social human problem. Yes. Okay. So you can't see, it says you can see it, but you really can't see it. That's why I always have to check, because, and so this highlights a point I was making earlier. You read books like Trump and Ars and Hampton Turner, or my reading with my professor on social identity theory. I mentioned people tend to see the world in a way that's self-serving. And I mentioned Leon Festinger and Fritz Heider. This is my theoretical framework that I will bring. You have to bring a theoretical framework to your data. When you interview people, when you interview your interviewees, your students that you're going to interview for your research project, you have to bring a theoretical framework with you to interpret the significance of what they say. Aside from creating the right questions and carrying out the interview, you then have to use a theoretical framework like critical race theory or social identity theory, because I really like social identity theory, right? Social identity theory. Maybe I'll just pull up a Wikipedia site here to show you what this Wikipedia entry for social identity theory looks like. So we go here to, this is the theoretical framework that I use to try to understand nationalism. So, and those of you who had me in other classes, you can see this, right? Maybe not. I'll just go ahead and screen share it again here. So social identity theory is the framework that I was using to explain to you how people tend to see or perceive the world around them in ways that are self-serving, right? So I want to have a positive self-image, and I compare myself to you or to other people, and I feel negative. I feel bad because I compare myself and I feel inferior to you. So I have to manage my identity in response. And so what I will do is I'll come up with a way to see myself in a way in comparison with you that allows me to feel good about me in a different way. I can try to become like you. So if America was founded by white Protestant Englishmen, if I am an Italian immigrant, Catholic, like my father was, I can go to America and become American and make sure my children are American. So like, I'm not Italian, even though I have an Italian last name. You can engage in social mobility. You can try to assimilate into the core group. That to me is what critical race theory is all about. The core group in America is white Anglo-Saxon Protestant, the people that founded the country. But there's always a core group in any state. We know what the core cultural group is from the name of that state, typically in Europe and Asia. So what's the core cultural group of Italy? Italian. What's the core cultural group of France? What's the core cultural group of Cambodia? Cambodian, right? But what's the core cultural group of the United States of America? We're not supposed to have a core cultural group, but we do. And it's white Anglo-Saxon Protestant. And it's easier for Northern Europeans who are not English to assimilate in it. So if you're a Protestant German or a Protestant Swedish person, you can assimilate pretty quickly. It's not so easy, but it happens for Italians and Catholic Irish and Orthodox Polish and European Jews. But it happens. We assimilate. But racial categories are more difficult to cross to assimilate. But it does happen. Like I told you, 120 years ago, white people, Italian people were not considered white in America. Italians living in America 120 years ago were not considered white. Southern Europeans were not white. Today we are. Hooray! And maybe Hispanic Americans will assimilate. In other words, critical race theory seems to me to be obvious because all states have a core culture that are the foundation of that authority system. And if you're a minority in Cambodia, you might have a problem, right? So that was supposedly one of the reasons for the start of the Cambodian-Vietnam War, was that the Vietnamese nationalist communists viewed the communist Khmer Rouge regime was oppressing the Vietnamese minority in Cambodia because they were a minority, right? So that to me, that's the essence of critical race theory. But it's true everywhere, not just in America. But this is social identity theory that people, that we try to, if we can't engage in social mobility, then we will engage in social creativity. Okay, you might be smarter than me, but I'm a better athlete than you. So I change the evaluation criteria. I engage in social creativity by coming up with a different way to evaluate myself on a different set of evaluation criteria that allow me to feel better than you, even though you are better than me on being smart, or better than me in being and having money. I can say, well, you know, you're smart, but I'm a better athlete. I'm more beautiful than you. So this is what I would bring to bear, for example, in doing interviews with people in terms of understanding their reaction to Barack Obama. Like, how do white Americans respond to Barack Hussein Obama with a Muslim name, a black man becoming president of the United States? Oh my God. And this has generated a hostile reaction. You know, you can't understand the emergence of Donald Trump unless you understand previously the election of Barack Obama and the reaction to that Barack Obama and the feminists represented by Hillary Clinton are undermining traditional American values that we all learned in church from our moksa or shinbu about what is right and wrong, about the proper role of men and women. And Donald Trump exploited that tremendously, successfully in the midst of globalization and all of these feedback information that traditional white Americans are getting, that somehow they are no longer their understanding of what is right and wrong is not predominant anymore. Yeah, so this is from Turner and Tadgefeld from the 70s and 80s. And so you can read about it on your own here. Yeah, Black is Beautiful. The Black is Beautiful movement and the associated African-American embrace of African hairdos like the afros. Culture, traditions, and music was provided by Tadgefeld and colleagues as an example of the cognitive creativity, social creativity of low status groups in the face of stable intergroup relations. Black is beautiful. So I'm glad that's there, because just to show you that it's a legitimate explanation. And what does it say for critical race theory here? Critical race theory is a cross-disciplinary intellectual and social movement of civil rights scholars and activists who seek to examine the intersection of race, society, and law in the United States. Law including policing, the justice system, and to challenge mainstream American liberal approaches to racial justice. Critical race theory, yeah! Draws on, oh, I didn't know that. This is my favorite, one of my favorite theorists, Antonio Gramsci, and not just because he's Italian. Back in, I've never really looked at this website before, this entry in Wikipedia for critical race theory. So let's go back and talk about the notes. Just to show you how this qualitative research has become a lot more controversial. But at the same time, including focus groups is really profitable, because this is used by marketers and advertising companies to come up with advertising campaigns and political campaigns. So qualitative research, again, we already covered this. To study this problem, qualitative research, researchers use an emerging or qualitative approach to inquiry. Yeah, oh, sorry. To inquire the collection of data in a natural setting sensitive to the people and places under study, and data analysis that is both inductive and deductive and establishes patterns or themes.